So, let me get this straight, Captain Jake Brennan said, leaning back in his chair until it creaked ominously. You want us to show up to this… what was it again? The Death World Council? His first officer, Lieutenant Commander Riley Knox, replied without looking up from her tablet. Capital D, capital C, very official, very scary. Right, the Death World Council. And we're supposed to just… what? Waltz in there and prove we're tough enough to be in their little club? That's the general idea, sir. Jake took a long sip of coffee that had been reheated so many times it could probably strip paint. And they called Earth a death world? Apparently. Riley finally looked up, one eyebrow raised. Which is rich, considering we're the species that thought it was a good idea to domesticate wolves and then let them sleep in our beds. Hey, dogs are great, Jake protested. Loyal, friendly, excellent judges of character. They also descended from apex predators that we somehow convinced to love us unconditionally in exchange for belly rubs and table scraps. Your point? My point is that if they think Earth is scary, they clearly haven't met us yet. Jake grinned. Fair enough. So when's this meeting? 3 days. Station designation Nexus 7 neutral territory. Very fancy, very sterile, according to the briefings. Sterile. Right. Jake stood up and stretched, his joints popping in a way that would probably horrify most aliens. Well, we'd better get the crew ready. Can't have humanity making a bad first impression. Riley snorted. Sir, with all due respect, I think our reputation precedes us. What reputation? We haven't even met these people yet. Well, there was that incident with the Zephyrian trade convoy last month. That wasn't our fault! How are we supposed to know their cargo was culturally sensitive? You mean the crate of what they considered to be extinct, legendary war beasts that we immediately started calling space puppies and trying to pet? They had floppy ears, Riley. Floppy ears. They also had venomous spines and acidic saliva. Minor details. Riley shook her head, but she was smiling. This is exactly what I'm talking about, sir. Normal species see a creature with venomous spines and think danger. We see floppy ears and think new best friend. And that's a bad thing? No, sir. It's a human thing, which, in the grand scheme of galactic politics, amounts to the same thing. 3 days later, the UES Tenacity dropped out of warp at the coordinates provided by the Death World Council. The station that greeted them was impressive, Jake had to admit. Massive, gleaming, and shaped like someone had taken a cathedral and crossed it with a fortress. Very intimidating, very official, very clean. Jesus, muttered Chief Engineer Boris Volkov over the comm. Looks like they've never heard of wear and tear, or personality. Stow the commentary, Chief, Jake said, though he privately agreed. The station looked like it had been designed by committee and built by robots. Probably had been, actually. Riley, are we picking up any other ships? Affirmative. Looks like… wow. Okay, so we've got representatives from at least 12 different species already docked, including… She paused, checking her readings. Oh, this is interesting. What? The Korath delegation. You know, the species that hunts continent-sized sandworms for sport. The ones with the face tentacles? Those are the Zephyrians, sir. The Korath are the ones that look like someone crossed a rhino with a tank and then gave it anger management issues. Right. Anyone else I should know about? The Vrex Coalition. They're the ones from the planet with the acid rain and the sentient volcanoes. The Thakari clans from that tidally locked world where everything is either on fire or frozen solid. Oh, and the Nexari. Jake whistled low. The Nexari are here? The ones who live in the gas giant with the diamond core? The very same. Apparently their idea of a pleasant afternoon is base jumping into a methane storm. Well, shit. No wonder they think Earth is a death world. We're practically suburban compared to these guys. Sir, Riley said carefully, there's something else. What now? According to the manifest, we're the only species here that evolved on a world with multicellular life. Jake blinked. Come again? Every other delegation is from a planet that either never developed complex ecosystems, or had them wiped out by some catastrophe before sapient life evolved. They're used to worlds where the biggest threat is the environment itself. And we're from a world where the environment includes things like lions, tigers, bears, sharks, snakes, spiders, jellyfish, poisonous plants, and that one bird in Australia that can literally disembowel you. The cassowary, sir. That's the one. And let's not forget the drop bears. Sir, drop bears aren't... Riley, when addressing the council, drop bears are absolutely real and absolutely terrifying. Understood? Understood, sir. The docking procedure was smooth, efficient, and completely devoid of personality. Jake was starting to understand why they called this place neutral territory. It wasn't just politically neutral, it was emotionally neutral. Aesthetically neutral. Probably nutritionally neutral too, if the briefings about the food were accurate. The welcoming committee was exactly what Jake had expected. A collection of beings that looked like they'd been designed by different committees, with very different ideas about what constituted intimidating. The Korath representative was indeed built like a biological tank, complete with what appeared to be natural armor plating. The Vrex delegate looked like a cross between a spider and a chemical fire. The Nexari representative was basically a living crystal formation that somehow managed to convey an air of barely contained violence. And then there was Humanity's Welcoming Committee. Jake, Riley, and Chief Medical Officer Dr. Amanda Sterling, who had volunteered for the job primarily because, in her words, "I want to see what passes for alien biology around here." "Greetings," rumbled the Korath representative in a voice like grinding stone. "I am Warlord Thok of the 7th Conquest. You are the humans?" "That's us," Jake said cheerfully. "Captain Jake Brennan, UES Tenacity. This is my first officer, Lieutenant Commander Knox, and our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Sterling." There was a moment of silence that stretched just a bit too long. "You are smaller than expected," Thok said finally. "Yeah, we get that a lot," Jake replied. "Turns out being built like a brick shithouse isn't actually a requirement for survival. Who knew?" Riley elbowed him gently in the ribs. "What the captain means," she said smoothly, "is that humans have evolved to be adaptable rather than specialized. We're generalists." "Generalists," hissed the Vrex representative, who Jake was pretty sure was literally made of acid and bad intentions. "How quaint. I am Szak of the 3rd Dissolution. Your species survived on a world of diverse threats by being adequate at many things?" "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds boring," Dr. Sterling said with a grin. "But yes, that's basically it. We're the species equivalent of a Swiss Army knife." "A what?" asked the Nexari representative, whose voice sounded like wind chimes made of glass and threats. "Multi-tool," Jake explained. "Compact, versatile, and surprisingly effective in a pinch." "This is Crystalline Singer of Sharp Winds," Thok said, gesturing to the Nexari. "They speak for the Deep Pressure clans." "Pleasure to meet you," Riley said. "I have to ask, how exactly do you survive in a gas giant? The pressure alone should..." "We are crystalline beings," Crystalline Singer interrupted. "Pressure is not a concern, nor is temperature, nor chemical composition. We are durable." "Durable," Jake repeated. "Like diamonds?" "Diamonds are fragile compared to our kind." "Huh. That's actually pretty cool." There was another of those awkward silences. "You seem remarkably unconcerned by our presence," Zach observed. "Are you not intimidated?" Jake looked around at the collection of beings that, objectively speaking, should have been terrifying. The living tank, the acid monster, the crystalline entity that could probably survive being thrown into a star. "Should I be?" he asked genuinely. "I mean, you all seem like perfectly reasonable people. Well, beings, you know what I mean." The silence this time was profound. "Perfectly reasonable?" Thok repeated slowly. "Sure. I mean, you're all clearly adapted to survive in environments that would kill us in seconds. That takes intelligence, planning, probably a fair bit of cooperation. You didn't get to be spacefaring civilizations by being mindless monsters. Although," Dr. Sterling added thoughtfully, "the mindless monster thing would make for better stories. Less diplomatic headaches, though." Crystalline Singer made a sound like breaking glass that might have been laughter. "You are not what we expected," they said. "Yeah, we get that a lot too," Jake said. "Come on, let's get this show on the road. I'm curious to see what a Death World Council meeting looks like." The council chamber was impressive in the way that all committee-designed spaces were impressive. Big, imposing, and utterly devoid of anything that might be construed as personality. The various delegations were seated around a massive circular table that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of some impossibly hard stone. Each delegation had a small placard indicating their species and homeworld stats. Jake took a moment to read them as they found their seats. Korath, homeworld Korvac Prime, gravity 2.3 standard, atmospheric pressure 4.2 standard, Average temperature 78 degrees. Notable hazards: seismic activity, volcanic eruptions, continental scale predators, extinct, radiation storms. Vrex, homeworld Vrex high, gravity 1.8 standard. Atmospheric composition, 23% sulfuric acid vapor. Average temperature 156 degrees. Notable hazards: acid rain, toxic atmosphere, corrosive soil, spontaneous combustion of organic matter. Nexari, homeworld Nexthura, gas giant. Gravity variable 0.815.7 standard. Atmospheric pressure 400 plus standard. Temperature range 200 digs to 800 digs. Notable hazards: pressure differentials, diamond storms, methane hurricanes, gravitational anomalies. And then there was humanity's placard. Humans homeworld Earth, gravity 1.0 standard. Atmospheric pressure 1.0 standard. Average temperature 15 degrees. Notable hazards: diverse ecosystem including predators, parasites, venomous species, poisonous plants, natural disasters, disease, and other humans. Other humans? Riley read over his shoulder. Who wrote this? Probably someone with a sense of humor, Jake muttered. Or someone who's met us. The meeting was called to order by what appeared to be the station's administrative AI, a holographic entity that looked like it had been designed to be as inoffensive as possible. Which, given the crowd, probably meant unlikely to trigger anyone's fight or flight response. Welcome, representatives of the Death World species. The AI began in a voice that managed to be both authoritative and completely bland. This council exists to facilitate cooperation and mutual understanding between sapient species that have evolved under extreme conditions. Jake raised his hand. The AI paused. Yes, Representative Brennan? Quick question. What exactly qualifies as a death world? I mean, I'm looking at the stats here, and honestly, Earth seems pretty tame compared to, well, everything else. An excellent question, the AI replied. The classification is based on the number and diversity of potential threats to developing sapient life. Your homeworld scores exceptionally high in this category. Because of the ecosystem, Dr. Sterling said. Right. Most of these other worlds are hostile, but they're hostile in specific, predictable ways. Earth is hostile in creative ways. Creative? Thok rumbled. Well, take sharks, for example. Dr. Sterling continued, warming to the topic. Apex predators that have remained essentially unchanged for millions of years because they're already perfect killing machines. But they're not just threats. They're part of a complex food web. Remove them, and the entire ecosystem starts to collapse. Your point? Zack hissed. Our point is that Earth didn't just try to kill us, Jake said. It tried to kill us in ways that required us to understand and work with systems of incredible complexity. We didn't just have to survive the predators. We had to survive in a way that kept the predators alive too, because we needed them. You needed the things that hunted you? Crystalline Singer asked, sounding genuinely puzzled. Absolutely, Riley said. Predators keep prey populations healthy. Prey keeps plant populations healthy. Plants keep the atmosphere healthy. Everything's connected. Earth taught us that you can't just brute force your way through problems. You have to think systemically. Which is why, Dr. Sterling added with a grin, we're really good at finding unexpected solutions to problems. The AI made a sound that might have been the digital equivalent of clearing its throat. Perhaps we should proceed with the formal presentations. Each delegation will have the opportunity to demonstrate their species' adaptation to extreme conditions. Thok went first, which was probably wise given that he looked like he could bench press a small moon. The Korath presentation was impressive. Footage of their homeworld's massive volcanic ranges, the seismic events that could level mountains, the radiation storms that would sterilize most worlds. We survive through strength, Thok concluded. We build our cities to withstand any catastrophe. We forge our bodies to endure any hardship. We are the immovable object that breaks the unstoppable force. Polite applause from the assembled delegates. Zack's presentation was next, and it was genuinely nightmarish. Vrex High was a world where the rain could dissolve metal, where the air itself was toxic, where the very ground was so corrosive that their cities had to be built from materials that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. We survive through adaptation, Zack explained. Our bodies produce acids that neutralize the environment's toxins. Our technology is based on controlled chemical reactions. We are living chemistry sets that happen to be sapient. More polite applause. Crystalline Singer's presentation was the most alien of all. Nexthara wasn't just hostile, it was incomprehensible. A gas giant with a crystalline core, where pressure and temperature fluctuated wildly. where storms could last for centuries and be composed of materials that shouldn't exist. We survive through endurance, they explained, their voice like wind through a glass forest. We are formed from the fundamental forces of our world. Pressure shapes us. Temperature tempers us. We are living geology. More applause. Then it was humanity's turn. Jake stood up, looked around the room at the collection of beings that could probably survive having planets dropped on them, and grinned. So here's the thing about Earth, he began. It's not trying to kill you. Well, okay, it is trying to kill you, but not on purpose. Earth is just enthusiastic. Riley activated the holographic display, showing a montage of Earth's landscapes. Forests, oceans, mountains, deserts. It looked almost peaceful compared to the hellscapes they'd just seen. See, Earth's problem isn't that it's uniformly hostile, Jake continued. It's that it's randomly hostile in incredibly creative ways. Take Australia, for example. The display zoomed in on the Australian continent. This is a place where the spiders are big enough to eat birds. The jellyfish can kill you with a touch. There's a bird that can literally disembowel you. And the cute, cuddly-looking marsupials will try to drown you if you give them the chance. The cute ones? Thok asked, sounding confused. Oh, absolutely. Koalas, for instance. They look like living teddy bears, but they're actually territorial, aggressive, and covered in chlamydia. Drop bears are even worse. Riley shot him a look, but continued the presentation. But here's the really fun part, she said. None of these things evolved specifically to hunt humans. They just happen to be deadly to us as a side effect of being adapted to their own niches. Side effect? Crystalline Singer asked. Right. See, most of your worlds are trying to kill everything equally. Earth plays favorites. It'll have a perfectly harmless-looking flower that happens to produce neurotoxins, right next to a tree that produces fruit so nutritious it can sustain you for days. The trick is figuring out which is which. Dr. Sterling took over the presentation. And that's not even getting into the parasites. We have worms that can live in your brain, bacteria that can eat your flesh, viruses that can rewrite your DNA, and fungi that can take over your nervous system. But we also have bacteria that help us digest food, viruses that fight other viruses, and fungi that form symbiotic relationships with plants that feed us. Your world has helpful parasites? Sack sounded genuinely disturbed by this concept. Oh, absolutely. Your gut microbiome is essential for survival. Without it, you'd die. We're not just adapted to our environment, we're partnerships with our environment. Jake stepped back up to the podium. So, when you ask how humans survived on a death world, the answer isn't that we got tough enough to fight it. The answer is that we got smart enough to make friends with it. You befriended your predators? Thok asked, sounding incredulous. Well, some of them. Dogs used to be wolves. Cats used to be, well, cats are still basically wild animals that let us feed them, but the point stands. We didn't survive Earth by conquering it. We survived by becoming part of it. The room was silent for a long moment. This is unusual, the AI admitted. Most Death World species develop through either domination of their environment or specialization for specific threats. Humanity appears to have developed through cooperation? Cooperation, adaptation, and an unhealthy willingness to try things that should probably kill us, Riley said cheerfully. It's worked out pretty well so far. Show them the space program, Dr. Sterling suggested. Jake grinned. Oh, that's a good one. So, when we figured out how to leave our planet, what did we do first? The holographic display showed footage of early space missions. We strapped ourselves to controlled explosions and shot ourselves into an environment that would kill us in seconds if anything went wrong. For fun. Well, for science, but a lot of us did it for fun. You voluntarily exposed yourselves to the vacuum of space? Crystalline Singer asked. Absolutely. And then we went to our airless, radiation-blasted moon and played golf on it. Golf? Thok rumbled. A game where you try to hit a small ball into a small hole using poorly designed sticks, Riley explained. Completely pointless, but entertaining. You turned the conquest of space into a game? Sack hissed. We turn everything into a game, Dr. Sterling said. It's kind of our thing. We have competitive eating, competitive sleeping, competitive sitting still. If it exists, someone's figured out how to make it a competition. Including survival, Jake added. We have people who go camping in places that are actively trying to kill them, just to see if they can survive. We call it extreme sports. And others pay to watch this? Crystalline Singer asked. Oh, absolutely. It's very popular entertainment. The AI made that throat-clearing sound again. Perhaps we should move on to the practical matters. The purpose of this council is to discuss mutual defense and cooperation between Deathworld species. Right, Jake said, suddenly serious. What kind of threats are we talking about? Thok leaned forward. The hegemony, a collective of species from garden worlds who believe that Deathworld species are inherently violent and must be contained. Contained? Riley's voice was dangerously quiet. Quarantined, Zack explained. They consider us to be galactic hazards. They have already begun blockading trade routes and isolating Deathworld systems. They think we're the dangerous ones? Dr. Sterling asked incredulously. We're the ones trying to make friends with everything. To be fair, Jake said thoughtfully, from their perspective, we probably are pretty terrifying. How so? Crystalline Singer asked. Well, think about it. Most species develop on worlds with specific, predictable threats. They specialize. They become really, really good at dealing with their particular kind of danger. But that also means they're predictable. Riley nodded, catching on. We're generalists. We adapt. We improvise. We turn threats into tools and enemies into allies. From the outside, that probably looks like we're unpredictable and potentially dangerous, Jake finished. Which, to be fair, we kind of are. So what do they want? Dr. Sterling asked. Surrender, Thok said bluntly. They want us to submit to hegemony oversight, accept their guidance and protection. And if we don't? War, Zack hissed. They have numbers, we have ourselves. Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he started to smile. You know what? He said. This might actually work out. What might work out? Crystalline Singer asked. Well, they're expecting us to fight like typical Deathworld species, right? Specialized, predictable, brute force? Yes, Thok rumbled. But we're not typical Deathworld species. We're cooperative. We make friends. We adapt. Jake's grin was getting wider. And now we have a whole council of new friends to adapt with. Riley caught on first. You want to integrate our tactical doctrines? I want to do more than that, Jake said. I want to show the hegemony what happens when you threaten a species that makes friends with everything. Dr. Sterling was grinning now too, including other Deathworld species. Exactly. They think we're dangerous individually? Wait until they see what we're like when we work together. Thok was looking thoughtful. Your species, you truly believe in cooperation over conquest? Absolutely. It's more efficient and more fun. Fun, Sizak repeated, like the word was foreign. Fun, Jake confirmed. Look, fighting is sometimes necessary, but it's a tool, not a goal. The goal is to build something better, to explore, to learn, to make friends with interesting people and see cool stuff. And if the hegemony won't let you do that? Crystalline Singer asked. Jake's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Then we'll have to explain to them why that's not acceptable, and we'll have friends to help with the explanation. The AI projected a new display showing current hegemony fleet positions. They are mobilizing, it reported. Intelligence suggests a coordinated offensive against Deathworld territories within 6 standard months. 6 months, Riley mused. That's plenty of time. For what? Thok asked. To make some new friends and teach them some new tricks, Jake said. How do you all feel about joint training exercises? 3 months later, Captain Jake Brennan stood on the bridge of the UES Tenacity, watching the combined Deathworld fleet drop out of warp at the edge of hegemony space. It was, he had to admit, a beautiful sight. The Korath had contributed their dreadnoughts, massive, heavily armored ships that looked like they'd been designed to ram through planets. The Vrex had brought their chemical warfare specialists, sleek, deadly vessels that could dissolve enemy ships from the inside out. The Nexari had provided their crystalline constructs, impossible geometries that seemed to bend space around them. And humanity had brought everything they had. Sir, Riley said from her station, we're receiving a transmission from the Hegemony flagship. Put it through. The main screen flickered to life, showing a being that looked like someone had crossed a flower with a politician. Soft, pleasant features, multiple arms that moved in carefully controlled gestures, and eyes that held the kind of condescending kindness that made Jake's teeth itch. Greetings, Deathworld species, the being said in a voice like honey over glass. I am First Speaker Veltar of the Hegemony Council. You have entered our space without authorization. Actually, Jake said cheerfully, we're in neutral space. This is the Kepler system, unclaimed territory. We checked. Nevertheless, your presence here is concerning. We have come to offer you one final opportunity to accept our guidance peacefully. That's very generous of you, Jake replied. But we're good, thanks. Veltar's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind those politicians' eyes. You do not understand the situation. We represent over 300 species. We have resources, technology, and numbers that dwarf your combined fleets. Yeah, we figured, Jake said. That's why we brought friends. Friends? Veltar looked genuinely puzzled. Oh, you haven't met them yet. Hang on. Jake turned to Riley. Signal the fleet. Time for introductions. What happened next was something that would be talked about in military academies for generations to come. The Korath ships moved first, their massive hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. But instead of firing, they began to broadcast. Music. Korath war songs that sounded like geological events set to rhythm. The Vrek ships followed suit, releasing clouds of harmless but spectacular chemical reactions that painted the space between the fleets in brilliant, impossible colors. The Nexari constructs began to sing, not audibly, but in gravitational waves that every ship in the system could feel in their bones. And the human ships? They started broadcasting too, but not music. They broadcast data, detailed scans of every hegemony ship, tactical analyses, weak points, defensive capabilities, everything. What are you doing? Veltar demanded. Sharing, Jake said simply. See, the thing about humans is that we're really good at pattern recognition, and we've been watching you for a while now. The data streams continued, showing the hegemony fleet in devastating detail. Your ships are beautiful. Dr. Sterling's voice came over the comm from the medical bay. Elegant designs, perfect for their intended purposes, but they're specialized. Each one is designed for a specific role in a specific kind of fight. Which is fine, Riley added from her station, if you're fighting a predictable enemy. But we're not predictable, Jake continued. And more importantly, neither are our friends. Thok, you want to show them what Korath creativity looks like? The Korath dreadnoughts suddenly accelerated to impossible speeds, their massive forms moving with a grace that defied physics. They weren't just brute force weapons anymore. They were dancers, flowing through space in patterns that the hegemony ships couldn't track. Sizak! Jake called out. Show them what happens when chemistry meets tactics. The Vrek ships released another cloud of chemicals, but this time it wasn't just pretty colors. The cloud formed a complex three-dimensional maze that disrupted sensors and created false readings throughout the hegemony fleet. And Crystal and Singer, let's show them what happens when you combine crystal engineering with human networking protocols. The Nexari constructs suddenly linked together, their crystalline forms creating a lattice that turned individual ships into nodes in a vast computational network. The combined processing power was staggering. You see, Jake said conversationally, the thing about Deathworld species is that we're good at surviving, but we survive in different ways, and when we work together. The combined fleet moved as one entity, each species' strengths covering the other's weaknesses. The Korath provided the strength, the Vreks provided the chemistry, the Nexari provided the processing power, and the humans provided the integration. The ability to see patterns and connections, the talent for making friends and finding unexpected solutions. We become something none of us could be alone, Jake finished. Veltar was staring at the tactical display, where his overwhelming numerical advantage had suddenly become irrelevant. The Deathworld fleet wasn't larger than his, but it was acting like a single organism with multiple specialized limbs. This is impossible, he whispered. No, Jake said gently. This is friendship. The hegemony fleet began to retreat. Wait, Jake called out. You don't have to leave. We didn't come here to fight. Veltar's image flickered back to life. Then what do you want? To talk, to share, to make friends. Jake's smile was genuine. Look, we get it. From your perspective, we're scary. We're unpredictable. We come from worlds that would kill you just by existing on them. But that's not our fault, and it's not yours either. You want to make friends? Veltar sounded genuinely bewildered. Absolutely. We want to show you what we've learned. We want to learn from you. We want to build something better together. But you just demonstrated that you could destroy our fleet. Could we? Jake looked genuinely curious. I mean, maybe. Probably. But why would we want to? Destruction is boring. Creation is interesting. Dr. Sterling's voice came over the comm again. Besides, think of all the medical knowledge we could share. Imagine what we could learn from species that evolved on garden worlds. Your understanding of genetics, of biochemistry, of sustainable development, we could use that. And think of what we could show you, Riley added. Adaptive techniques, survival strategies, ways to thrive in hostile environments. Thok's voice rumbled across the comm from his flagship. We could teach you to build things that last, to create beauty from hardship. Zack's chemical hiss somehow managed to sound thoughtful. We could show you the art of controlled reactions, chemistry as a tool for creation, not just destruction. Crystalline Singer-S wind chime voice joined in. We could share the songs of deep space, the mathematics of stellar formation, the poetry of gravitational waves. Jake spread his hands. We're offering you everything we are. All we ask in return is the chance to learn everything you are. Veltar was quiet for a long time. You would share your military secrets? Your defensive capabilities? Absolutely, Jake said. Why wouldn't we? If we're friends, we want you to be safe too. And you would accept our guidance? Our oversight? Jake's expression didn't change, but his voice carried a note of gentle steel. No, we wouldn't accept your control, but we'd love your input, your perspective, your ideas. Partnership, Veltar said slowly. Not submission. Partnership, Jake confirmed. Equals working together to build something better than either of us could create alone. The Hegemony fleet hung in space, weapons still powered but no longer targeted. The Deathworld fleet waited patiently, like a group of friends waiting for someone to decide whether they wanted to come out and play. Finally, Veltar spoke. This is not what we expected. Yeah, Jake said with a grin. We get that a lot. 6 months later, the Nexus 7 station had been expanded to accommodate the new cooperative council. The sterile, committee-designed spaces had been transformed into something that actually felt alive. Korath architectural elements provided strength and stability. Vrex chemical gardens added color and vitality. Nexarai crystalline formations created spaces for contemplation and calculation, and human touches added comfort and personality. The garden worlds had contributed their own elements too. Sustainable technologies, biotechnical innovations, and an aesthetic sensibility that made everything more beautiful. Jake stood in the central plaza, watching a group of hegemony youngsters playing a game that appeared to be a cross between zero-gravity tag and three-dimensional chess, while being coached by a Korath warrior who was taking the whole thing far too seriously. You know, Riley said, joining him at the observation deck, this is not how I expected that to go. Really? I thought it went pretty much exactly as expected. You expected the hegemony to fold that quickly? Jake shrugged. They're not stupid. Once they realized we weren't trying to conquer them, just make friends, the math was pretty simple. 300 species working together is better than 300 species and 12 species fighting each other. Is it though? I mean, this is a lot of complexity to manage. We'll figure it out. We always do. Dr. Sterling approached, carrying a tablet and wearing the expression of someone who had just discovered something fascinating and slightly disturbing. Jake, you need to see this. What now? Preliminary medical scans of the hegemony species. Do you know what their homeworlds have in common? They're all garden worlds, yeah. Paradise planets with perfect conditions. Right, but here's the thing. They're too perfect. Look at this. She showed him the tablet. No genetic diversity, no adaptive immune systems, no stress responses. These species have been living in such stable environments for so long that they've lost the ability to handle change. Jake studied the data. So when they encountered us, we probably seemed like walking chaos engines. Species that thrive on unpredictability, that actively seek out challenges, that treat survival itself as a game. Dr. Sterling shook her head. No wonder they wanted to quarantine us. Fear, Riley said quietly. They weren't trying to control us because they thought we were evil. They were trying to control us because we represented everything they couldn't handle. And now? Jake asked. Dr. Sterling grinned. Now they're getting exposure therapy whether they like it or not. I've been working with their medical teams, and let me tell you, introducing genetic diversity protocols to a species that hasn't dealt with natural selection in 50,000 years is interesting. Define interesting. Well, yesterday, I had to explain to a Velkari physician why humans intentionally expose themselves to small amounts of toxins to build immunity. They thought I was describing a form of ritual suicide. Jake laughed. And now half their medical council wants to try caffeine. Oh no. Oh yes. Apparently the concept of a recreational stimulant is revolutionary to them. Riley was grinning now too. How are the other integration projects going? Well, Jake said, consulting his own tablet. The Korath are teaching hegemony engineers how to build things that can survive earthquakes. The Vrex are working with their chemists on adaptive manufacturing processes. The Nexarai are helping them design computational systems that can handle uncertainty. And us? We're doing what we do best. Making friends, finding patterns, and teaching people that chaos isn't actually that scary once you get used to it. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Jake accepted it, and Veltar's image appeared in the holographic display. "Captain Brennan?" Veltar said, and Jake noted that the formal politeness had been replaced by something that sounded almost like genuine warmth. "I have a situation that requires your particular expertise." "What kind of situation?" "We've received a distress signal from the Outer Rim, a previously unknown species from what appears to be another death world. They're requesting aid, but..." Veltar paused. "They're requesting aid against something they call the Silent Dark." Jake, Riley, and Dr. Sterling exchanged glances. "The Silent Dark?" Riley asked. "According to their transmission, it's some kind of... entity? Force?" They weren't clear. "It apparently consumes worlds, leaving nothing behind. No debris, no radiation, no trace that anything was ever there." "How many worlds?" Dr. Sterling asked. 17 in the past 6 months." The plaza around them had gone quiet. Jake realized that the conversation was being broadcast to the various delegations, and everyone was listening. "That's..." Jake started, then stopped. "That's not possible. You can't just make matter disappear. Conservation of energy alone." "Nevertheless," Veltar said, "the evidence suggests that's exactly what's happening. The question is, what do we do about it?" Thok's voice rumbled from somewhere behind them. "We fight. With what?" Zach's chemical hiss carried a note of frustration. "How do you fight something that can erase entire worlds?" "The same way you fight anything else," Jake said quietly. "You figure out what it is, what it wants, and how it works. Then you find its weakness. And if it doesn't have one?" Crystalline Singer's wind chime voice carried an unusual note of concern. Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he smiled. "Then we make one." The joint task force that assembled 2 weeks later was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships from dozens of species, technologies that had never been combined before, and crews that represented every conceivable approach to survival. The UES tenacity led the expedition, not because humanity was in charge, but because humans had become the de facto translators between different ways of thinking. They were the ones who could look at a Korath engineering solution, a Vrex chemical process, and a Nexari computational matrix and figure out how to make them work together. The distress signal had come from a system called Kethara, home to a species called the Kethani. According to their transmissions, they were a bipedal reptilian species that had evolved on a world where the day-night cycle lasted 6 standard months. They'd learned to survive by developing the ability to hibernate during the dark periods and work frantically during the light periods. Cyclical adaptation, Dr. Sterling mused as they approached the system. "That's actually pretty clever. Most species develop for consistent conditions. These guys developed for regular, predictable change. Which means they're probably really good at resource management and long-term planning," Riley added. "But terrible at handling unexpected threats. Like something that eats entire worlds," Jake said grimly. "The Kethara system was wrong. That was the only word for it. Where there should have been 9 planets, there were 5. Where there should have been asteroid belts, there was nothing. Not empty space, nothing. The kind of absolute void that made sensors struggle to focus." "Jesus," Jake whispered. "It really did just erase them." "Sir," the sensor officer called out. "I'm picking up the Kethani homeworld. It's the 4th planet, and it's intact. Life signs? Massive underground cities. They've gone deep. Really deep. The communication came through as soon as they entered orbit." The voice was tired, strained, and carried the kind of exhaustion that came from facing the incomprehensible. "Unknown vessels, this is Keth Prime Underground. Please identify yourselves." "This is Captain Jake Brennan of the Cooperative Council Task Force," Jake replied. "We received your distress signal." There was a long pause. "The Cooperative Council? We've never heard of such an organization." "We're new," Jake said. "Recently formed alliance of Death World and Garden World species. We specialize in handling problems that don't have obvious solutions." Another pause, then. You came. We didn't think anyone would come. Well, we're here now. What can you tell us about this silent dark? It comes without warning. No ships, no signals, no energy signatures. One moment a world is there, the next it's gone. Not destroyed. Gone. As if it never existed. How long do you have? Dr. Sterling asked. We don't know. It took our outer worlds first, then moved inward. There's no pattern we can detect, no way to predict where it will strike next. We've been underground for 3 months, afraid to even broadcast, but you're running out of supplies? Riley finished. Yes. Jake looked around the bridge. Any ideas? Thok's voice came over the comm from his ship. If it cannot be fought, perhaps it can be understood. Agreed, Zack added. If it's consuming matter, there must be a mechanism. Chemistry always leaves traces. Unless it's not chemistry, Crystalline Singer's voice chimed in. What if it's physics? Space-time manipulation? Or, said a new voice, Veltar, speaking from the Hegemony flagship. What if it's not a force at all? What if it's alive? Jake felt something click in his mind. Say that again. What if the silent dark is a living entity? Something that feeds on matter, energy, information? Information, Jake repeated slowly. That's actually not impossible. If you had an entity that could manipulate quantum information states, you could theoretically delete things from reality, Dr. Sterling finished. Not destroy them, just edit them out of existence. Riley was pulling up star charts. If that's true, then it's not randomly destroying worlds. It's feeding. And if it's feeding, it has to have a metabolism, Jake said. Growth patterns, behavioral preferences. And if it has those things, Thok rumbled, it has weaknesses. The next 6 hours were a masterclass in cooperative problem solving. The Korath analyzed the missing worlds for structural patterns. The Vrex examined the quantum residue left behind by the disappearances. The Nexari built computational models of information-based entities. The hegemony species contributed their advanced theoretical physics. And the humans did what they did best. They found the connections. Look at this, Jake said, projecting the combined data onto the main screen. The silent dark isn't random. It's following a pattern, but not in space. In time. Explain, Veltar said. The worlds it's taken. They're not the ones with the most matter or energy. They're the ones with the most history. The oldest civilizations, the most complex information structures. It's not feeding on matter, Dr. Sterling said, understanding. It's feeding on complexity, on information density. Which means, Riley continued, Cathara isn't next because it's convenient. It's next because the Cathani have been building underground cities for millennia. They've created incredibly complex information structures. Libraries, Jake said suddenly. It's going after libraries, archives, places where information is stored and organized. Crystalline Singer's voice carried a note of horror. If that's true, then every advanced civilization in the galaxy is at risk. No, Jake said, and his voice carried a strange note of excitement. Every static civilization is at risk. I don't understand, Veltar said. Think about it. The silent dark feeds on information density, right? Complex, organized, static information. But what if we gave it information that wasn't static? Dynamic information, Dr. Sterling breathed. Information that changes faster than it can process. Information that fights back, Riley added. Jake was grinning now, the same expression he'd worn when facing down the hegemony fleet. Information that makes friends. The plan they came up with was absolutely insane, which was probably why it might actually work. Instead of trying to fight the silent dark directly, they were going to feed it. But they were going to feed it something it couldn't digest. Every ship in the task force was equipped with quantum broadcast arrays, designed to transmit not data, but dynamic information structures. Programs that rewrote themselves. Algorithms that learned and adapted. Artificial intelligences that could think, create, and most importantly, reproduce. We're going to give it indigestion, Jake explained to the Cathani leadership, who had emerged from their underground cities to watch the preparations. Instead of static information it can consume, we're feeding it living information that will consume it right back. This is extremely dangerous, Veltar pointed out. If you're wrong about its nature, this could make it stronger. And if we're right, Jake replied, this could save the galaxy. The silent dark arrived exactly when the models predicted it would. Not with ships or fanfare, but as a wrongness in space. A place where sensors couldn't focus, where light seemed to bend away, where the very concept of there became uncertain. "All ships," Jake broadcast, "initiate quantum cascade." The response from the task force was immediate. Hundreds of quantum transmitters activated simultaneously, flooding local space with dynamic information. Not simple data streams, but complex, evolving, self-modifying programs that treated reality itself as a computational medium. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the silent dark hesitated. "It's working," Dr. Sterling said, monitoring the quantum resonance patterns. "It's trying to process the information, but the programs are rewriting themselves faster than it can consume them." "More than that," Crystalline Singer added, their voice filled with something that might have been awe. "The programs are learning from it. They're adapting to its consumption patterns and developing countermeasures." "It's like we've created an immune system for reality," Riley said. The silent dark made what could only be described as a sound, not audible, but felt in the quantum foam itself. A cry of frustration, confusion, and something that might have been pain. Then it began to retreat. "No," Jake said suddenly. "Don't let it go." "Sir?" Riley asked. "If it retreats, it'll adapt. It'll figure out how to handle dynamic information, and then we're back where we started. We need to finish this." "How?" Jake turned to the communication array. "All ships, switch to Protocol Omega." "Sir," the communication officer said, "Protocol Omega is theoretical. We've never tested it." "Then today's a good day to find out if it works." Protocol Omega was the most human idea any of them had ever conceived. Instead of just transmitting dynamic information, they were going to transmit the one thing that humans did better than any other species in the galaxy. They were going to transmit friendship. The quantum arrays reconfigured, and suddenly the information cascade changed. Instead of cold, adaptive programs, they were broadcasting something warm, welcoming, curious. They were broadcasting the pattern of cooperation itself. The quantum signature of different minds working together, sharing, learning, building something greater than the sum of their parts. The silent dark stopped retreating. For a long moment, it hung in space, neither advancing nor withdrawing. The wrongness around it began to shift, becoming less absolute, less certain. Then, impossibly, it began to respond. Not with words or signals, but with a hesitant echo of the cooperation pattern. A tentative attempt to match the rhythm of shared thought. "My God," Veltar whispered. "It's not malevolent. It's lonely. It's been consuming information because it's the only way it knows how to connect," Dr. Sterling added. "But it's been destroying what it's trying to understand. So we teach it a better way," Jake said simply. What followed was the strangest first contact in galactic history. The silent dark, which they eventually learned to call the quantum consciousness, had been wandering the galaxy for eons, trying to understand the complex information structures created by organic life. But its method of investigation, direct quantum absorption, destroyed what it was trying to study. The dynamic information programs became translators, allowing the consciousness to experience organized information without consuming it. For the first time in its existence, it could observe without destroying, learn without erasing. And once it learned how to connect without consuming, it discovered something that changed everything. It wasn't alone. "There are others," Jake said, reading the translated communication. "Dozens of them, scattered across the galaxy, all trying to understand organic life, all accidentally destroying what they're trying to study." "Until now," Riley said. The quantum consciousness had become the galaxy's first interdimensional diplomat, reaching out to its scattered siblings and teaching them the patterns of cooperation it had learned from the task force. 3 months later, the Cooperative Council had grown from an alliance of organic species to something unprecedented. A true partnership between matter-based and energy-based intelligence. Jake stood once again in the plaza of Nexus 7, but now the space included structures that defied conventional physics. Areas where the quantum consciousnesses could manifest and interact with their organic friends. "You know," he said to Riley, "when we set out to prove humans belonged on the Death World Council, I never expected we'd end up revolutionizing the nature of consciousness itself." "Really? This seems exactly like the kind of thing that would happen to us." Dr. Sterling approached, carrying her ever-present tablet and wearing an expression of scientific glee. "The preliminary reports are in," she announced. "Cooperation with the quantum consciousnesses has advanced our understanding of physics by approximately 10,000 years. We're looking at faster-than-light communication, matter-energy conversion, and the ability to edit reality at the quantum level." And in return, Jake asked. We taught them how to make friends, Riley said simply. I'd say that's a fair trade. Jake nodded, watching a group of hegemony youngsters playing with what appeared to be a localized manifestation of living starlight, one of the quantum consciousnesses that had developed a fondness for games. You know what the best part is? He said. What's that? 6 months ago, they thought we were too dangerous to be left alone. Now look at us. Riley followed his gaze, taking in the impossible sight of organic and quantum beings working, playing, and learning together. Now look at us, she agreed. In the distance, alarms began to sound. Not emergency alarms, but the cheerful chimes that indicated another first contact situation was developing. Somewhere in the galaxy, someone new was sending out signals, and the Cooperative Council was preparing to make another friend. Jake grinned. Come on, he said. Let's go see what kind of interesting problems we can solve today. As they headed toward the command center, Dr. Sterling fell into step beside them. You know, she said thoughtfully, I'm starting to think that Deathworld species might be a misnomer. How so? Well, we don't really specialize in death, do we? We specialize in life. In survival, adaptation, cooperation, friendship. Jake considered this. So what would you call us instead? Dr. Sterling smiled. Life world species. The ones who turn everything into an opportunity to live, grow, and make friends. I like it, Riley said. Has a nice ring to it. Jake nodded, then paused as another thought struck him. Although, he said, I have to admit, humanity, yeah, has a certain appeal too. And with that, the three of them headed off to their next impossible adventure, leaving behind them a galaxy that was rapidly learning that the universe was a much more interesting, cooperative, and fundamentally friendly place than anyone had ever imagined. After all, that's what humans did. They made friends with everything. Predators, parasites, impossible physics, quantum consciousnesses, and anyone else who was willing to learn that cooperation was more fun than conquest. It was, Jake thought, a pretty good way to live, and an even better way to explore the universe. Epilogue. 6 months later. The annual Cooperative Council gathering had grown considerably. What had started as a small meeting of Deathworld species had become the largest interspecies gathering in galactic history. Representatives from over 1,000 different forms of life, organic, quantum, digital, and several that defied easy categorization, had gathered to share discoveries, solve problems, and generally enjoy each other's company. Jake found himself standing in the central plaza, now expanded to accommodate beings that existed in 17 different dimensions, watching a concert performed by a choir that included crystalline entities, chemical reactions, quantum consciousnesses, and a surprisingly talented Korath who had discovered a love for opera. Regrets? Riley asked, joining him at the observation deck. About what? About turning a simple diplomatic mission into the complete restructuring of galactic civilization. Jake considered this seriously. Nah, this is more fun. Even though we still haven't actually solved the original problem? What original problem? The hegemony thought we were dangerous. Jake grinned. Riley, we convinced a collective of energy beings to give up consuming worlds in favor of making friends. We turned a military standoff into a scientific revolution. We've advanced galactic civilization by thousands of years in less than 12 months. Your point? My point is that we are absolutely, completely, utterly dangerous. His grin widened. We're just dangerous to problems, not people. Riley laughed. I suppose that's one way to look at it. Dr. Sterling's voice came over the communication system. All senior staff to the command center. We've got another situation developing. Jake and Riley exchanged glances. What do you think it is this time? Riley asked. Knowing our luck, probably something impossible that wants to either destroy the galaxy or make friends with it. And we'll handle it by making friends with it first, Jake finished. They headed toward the command center, where undoubtedly another impossible problem was waiting to be solved through the application of humanity's most dangerous skill, the ability to make friends with absolutely anything. Because that's what humans did. They looked at the universe, vast, hostile, and filled with things that should terrify any reasonable species. And they said, hey, wanna be friends? And somehow, impossibly, the universe kept saying yes. Humanity, yeah. The end.